Hello everyone, my name is Dr. John Brittingham and I am the instructor for UNIV 401 these next few weeks. This is the online version of UNIV 401, which means it's a little bit different from the 401 we have come to know and love and or loathe. But anyway, in this video I'm going to go over a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about what this course is all about, and then the major theme of the course. And finally, what major assignments you're going to have to do to successfully pass the class. So without further ado, let's get started. First section, UNIV 401 Advanced Integrative Studies is the senior general education capstone class for undergraduates who are attending Greenville University. Now, as such, 401 aims to be a place where students can do some serious interdisciplinary research, demonstrate senior level communication, and engage in self-reflective inquiry in a way that helps shape how we encounter and interact with the world. This class is essentially all about completing one task, and that is the 401 group project. And this is a project that's focused on a specific topic within the larger theme, Love Your Neighborhood. But it involves a bunch of smaller assignments and tasks that all work together to help you develop that larger project. For now, think about UNIV 401 this way. This is the class that all of your gen eds have prepared you for. You've learned how to read a variety of sources and find good resources for building good arguments in classes like UNIV 101 and 102 and Philosophy 201. And you've learned how to communicate effectively in classes like Com 101 and English 105. And then you learned how to do value-based inquiry in Theo 110 and interdisciplinary work in Science and Christianity. You've been prepared for this task, and now all that's left is for you to do it. But don't worry, I'll be here to help you through all the various steps of the class to make sure that you cross that finish line successfully. Make no mistake, you'll be the ones who are doing the work, but I'll be right there with you, supporting you, answering questions, and helping you get done what you need to get done. Now, given that we've talked about what this course is, let's focus on the topic of this year's class. In just living our life, we make certain assumptions about the way the world works. We assume that things are getting better as a whole. Problems like inequality and racism used to be real issues, and maybe they still are. But we might assume that things are moving toward the amelioration of inequality and the end of racism. We did, after all, once upon a time, have a black president. In other words, we by and large assume that things are getting better. Or are they? In 2014, after the police shooting of Mike Brown, the national media started paying attention to the St. Louis region. They began asking questions like, how did Ferguson, Missouri become Ferguson, Missouri? How did St. Louis become so segregated? Now, if you're unsure about racial segregation in the city closest to Greenville University, this is also the city where I currently live, I want you to check out this map. This is known as the racial dot map. Each dot represents a person. Each blue dot, a white person. Each green dot, a black person. Each red dot, someone of Asian descent. What you may notice about the map is that the city seems rather divided. There are clear areas where there's hardly any mixture of green dots or blue dots. And yeah, while there might be some integrated areas, by and large, the city of St. Louis remains deeply segregated. Now, this segregation is part of a larger pattern of neighborhood segregation in the United States. And this pattern of segregation has a history. You see, historically, segregation didn't just include water fountains and bathrooms, but entire neighborhoods and towns. As noted segregation and housing scholar Richard Rothstein states in his landmark text, The Color of Law, quote, to prevent lower-income African Americans from living in neighborhoods where middle-class whites resided, local and federal officials began in the 1910s to promote zoning ordinances that reserved middle-class neighborhoods for single-family homes that lower-income families of all races could not afford. And focusing specifically on St. Louis housing history, Rothstein continues, saying that St. Louis appointed its first plan commission in 1911 and 5 years later hired Harlan Bartholomew as its full-time planning engineer. His assignment was to categorize every structure in the city, single-family residential, multifamily residential, commercial, or industrial, and then propose rules and maps to prevent future multifamily, commercial, or industrial structures from impinging on single-family neighborhoods. According to Bartholomew, an important goal of St. Louis zoning was to prevent movement into finer residential districts by colored people. He noted that without previous zoning law, such neighborhoods had become run down. Where values have depreciated, homes are either vacant or occupied by colored people, end quote. The wild thing about this particular urban history is how utterly boring and banal the evil of racism actually is. In the case of St. Louis, at least, there's nothing all that overt about it. Just a bunch of zoning laws put into place that would, by economics alone, keep African American families out of certain neighborhoods. Now, this is the past, but what about 2019? 4 decades after the passing of the Fair Housing Act, residential segregation remains a key feature of America's urban landscape. Although levels of black segregation have moderated since the Civil Rights era, the declines have been concentrated in metropolitan areas with small black populations. In areas with large African American communities, places such as New York, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, Houston, and Washington, the declines have been minimal or non-existent. As a result, in 2000, a majority of black urban dwellers continued to live under conditions of hypersegregation. Now, this is a quote by Douglas Massey in the article Racial Segregation and the American Foreclosure Crisis. Massey, who's a scholar of segregation, goes on to say that residential segregation has always created dense concentrations of potentially exploitable clients in need of capital. But what changed in the 1990s was the attractiveness of such borrowers to mortgage lenders. This was the very problem that precipitated the 2008 financial crisis. So even though that's 10 years ago, that is a problem that was essentially created by this predatory approach to lending. Now, if that sounds really boring to you, it's because it kind of is. But all of this boring stuff, all these mortgage-backed securities and subprime mortgages and predatory lenders and covenantal agreements in neighborhoods and all of this stuff is very, very boring paperwork. But it has a profound impact on who gets to live in our neighborhoods and who doesn't. Who has access to things like clean water or reliable housing structures or good schools or well-funded and repaired roads, right? All of these things are interconnected, and all of these things affect who gets to live well and who doesn't. So if we're wondering about this question of who is our neighbor and loving our neighbor, and by extension loving our neighborhood, then we need to be thinking about these questions. Because these questions about banal things like mortgages and housing agreements actually fall pretty significantly and strongly into the history of racial segregation writ large in the United States. One of the first articles that you're going to read in this class is The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, Coates is the author of The Beautiful Struggle, Between the World and Me, and We Were 8 Years in Power. He also writes the comic books for Marvel, Black Panther, and Captain America currently. So he's a guy who talks about a lot of different things. But one of the big things that he spent a lot of time on, and that you'll notice in the article that you read, is reading contemporary history into the history of slavery, Jim Crow, etc. So, Coates uses a very particular word here, and that word is plunder. In his mind, slavery was plunder, Jim Crow was plunder, and now segregation is plunder. And as Coates himself makes clear, plunder in the past makes plunder in the present efficient. Without the history of segregation and racism, the present would not be one where neighborhoods are so stratified along racial and class lines. So in this class, we'll work together across disciplines to make our own contributions to these problems, old and new. We're not experts in the field, but we're somewhat experts in our fields. And we're also Christians and or ethical citizens who have been given the task of lifting up the lowly. In this class, we'll be putting the critical faculties of our majors to work in understanding better how to love our neighbors. But you might be asking, how will we do this? Well, through a series of individual and group assignments that will together help you understand our class topic of loving our neighbor. Now, there are two groups of assignments, individual assignments and group assignments. You have two individual assignments, the Christian thought or ethical thought paper, and then your disciplinary research paper. In your Christian or ethical thought paper, this paper asks you to think about your personal values and how they shape how you think and encounter the world. You might surprise yourself with how much you care about a particular issue when you stop and reflect on it a little bit. And that's what this assignment is all about. Now, this assignment is followed by the disciplinary research paper. Here, you'll think about how you have been shaped by your major and or majors and how that gives you a particular set of tools to help you and your group complete your 401 project. From there, you'll have a few group assignments. Your group will come up with a topic and craft a group project proposal. And this group project proposal will be followed by a group annotated bibliography, where you will compile a list of quality resources from your various disciplines to help you complete your project and support your claims. Your group will follow the bibliography with a group interdisciplinary paper. And here you'll explain how the unique majors and programs you've trained in these past few years work together to build a bespoke theoretical tool for analyzing your group's problem area. Then you have the actual project itself and a group self-eval at the end to reflect on the work of that project. All of these projects stack, and by that I mean they are not just busy work, but they all develop ideas and arguments that build into your final project. Just as you have been preparing for this class by taking all your various Gen Ed courses, so too does your group project result from these smaller assignments that help build it into a cohesive whole. So that's it. That's 401. I'm really excited to take this journey with all of you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me here. I think here, I'm going to put it right here. Right here. Email me here. All right, that's it. I wish you more than luck.